Maximillion Mouse, The Boat Trip by Dawn Wheeler. Out in the country by the shore of Mud Pond, there's a great big oak tree with a tiny little door at the bottom of it. Inside that tiny little door is the house of Maximillion Mouse, or Max for short. Max loves his home by Mud Pond because it's nice and quiet. Most animals and people stay away from Mud Pond. The water's too shallow for swimming, and the mosquitoes are quite bad in the summer. However, the pond is perfect for Max. He's just a little mouse, and he doesn't need much water. He also has thick fur, so he doesn't mind the mosquitoes much either. This adventure begins on a very hot summer day, the kind of day that would be perfect for swimming. Max would love to float on a stick all day in the water, relaxing and napping. However, Max knows that there is a lot of work to be done before he can go swimming. Most of the summer has to be spent gathering food and supplies for the long, cold winter. If Max does not gather enough food and sticks for his fire, he will go hungry or freeze before spring comes. Today, Max was going to take care of all the mushrooms that he had found. He has to break them up into little pieces and scatter them out to dry in the sun. They don't taste quite as good dried out, but they will last longer that way. When Max was all done breaking up the mushrooms, he went down to the pond for a drink. As he was drinking, he noticed something floating in the water. It looked like a berry, so he picked it up. It was pretty blue color and looked tasty, but Max did not know if he should eat it. It could be poisonous, so he took it up to his good friend Cecil the bird. Cecil was a wise old bird. He would know if it was a good kind of berry. Max climbed the hidden stairway that took him up to the top of the old tree where Cecil the bird lived. "Cecil!" Max shouted. Cecil did not hear very well, so Max had to speak very loudly. Cecil was taking a nap, and Max had startled him. "I'm just resting my eyes!" Cecil shouted back. Max laughed because he knew that was code for, "I'm sleeping, but I'm not supposed to be sleeping." Max showed Cecil the berry and asked if it was safe to eat. Cecil looked at the berry and then took a bite. "Oh, most certainly you can eat this berry. It's a blueberry. Here, taste it for yourself." Max tasted the berry, and it was delicious. "Wow, where can I find more of these?" asked Max. "They grow on the other side of the pond, by the old dump," said Cecil. "Maybe I can fly over there and bring one back for you sometime." Cecil yawned and closed his eyes, so Max said goodbye and returned back down to the pond. Max sat by the pond shore, staring across. It really isn't that far if you could fly straight across it. But he did not have any wings, and he could not fly. Max would have to walk around the pond, and that really was quite far for a small mouse. He could float on a log over, but how would he bring some berries back with him? If only I had a boat. Max thought about it some more and decided that maybe he could make a boat. Max ran off into the woods in search of some materials that he could build a boat with. First, Max found an old string and some long green twigs, which he decided could be turned into a raft. Then he found a plastic spoon that would make a nice paddle. This wasn't quite enough, though, so he continued to search through the woods. Finally, near a meadow, he found a piece of an old yellow kite that would work perfectly. The wind could help push him across the pond. Once the raft was built, Max took 2 grass baskets that he had weaved and set off on his raft to sail across the pond. The wind was strong that day and blew him across the pond in no time. His sail had worked perfectly. When Max reached the other side of the pond, he tied up his raft and went in search of the berries. It was not long, and Max had found a bush loaded with berries. He picked the biggest one he could reach and took a big bite out of it. How delicious! This was much better than the one that had been floating in the pond. Max filled his little grass baskets up until they were overflowing, and then he filled his belly until that was overflowing too. Max put the baskets onto the raft and decided to sit in the shade for a little while. The sun was pretty strong now, and he didn't want to burn his nose. Max laid down under a mushroom, and before long, the sound of the water lapping against the shore had made him fall asleep. Max was having a wonderful dream about eating a blueberry pie when an ant crawled across his foot, waking him up. Max woke up with a jolt and shouted, "I'm just resting my eyes!" His nap was way too long, and most of the day was gone now. Max ran to the raft to hurry home, but it was nowhere to be found. Oh no, he shouted. Someone or something had taken his raft and all of his berries. Max was sad and sat down wondering what to do. He thought really hard for an answer to his problem. He needed to get home, but he still wanted to bring back some of the delicious berries. Max was pretty good at figuring things out, but he knew he couldn't carry the berries himself, so he decided to search around in a nearby garbage dump for some ideas. He saw lots of glass bottles and rusty cans, but they wouldn't do him any good. Then he saw something in a clump of mud that just might help him. It was an old plastic toy truck. It must have been bright yellow at one time, but now it was faded and had dirt all over it. All the wheels were still on it though, and this gave Max an idea, so he ran to find a piece of grapevine. Max found a piece of grapevine and tied this to the front of the toy truck. He gave it a good yank and the truck leaped out of the mud. Max pulled the truck over to the blueberry bushes and filled the back with berries. After the truck was full of berries, he started to pull the truck along the pond towards home. He had a long way to go, and he needed to hurry. Some of the shoreline was too rough for the truck, so Max had to pull the truck into a nearby clearing so that he could keep going. He was pulling the truck in the grass and making pretty good time when suddenly there was a sound that no mouse ever wanted to hear. Max looked up and saw an awful sight. It was a hawk. All the hair stood up on the back of Max's neck. You see, hawks eat mice, and Max did not want to be anyone's dinner. Max looked around for a place to hide, but there wasn't one. Max hid in the only place he could think, inside the cab of the toy truck. Max thought he would be safe and the hawk hadn't seen him, until the truck started to roll. The truck was on a small hill, and now it was rolling down and out of control. Max closed his eyes and held on for his life. The truck finally stopped when it smashed into a rock. Bam! Max was so glad it had stopped. Wow, what a ride, he said. He opened his eyes and peeked outside the truck to see if the hawk was gone. Oh no, Max shouted. What a mess! The blueberries had flown everywhere when he hit the rock. Max was about to get out and pick up the berries when he heard the sharp cry of the hawk again. He froze. Max knew that if he got out, he would become the hawk's dinner. There was nothing he could do but to sit and wait until the hawk was gone. So that is what Max did. He stayed inside the truck and waited and waited. Max was too afraid to get out of the truck, and before he knew it, the sun had gone down behind the hills and nighttime had come. It was too dark to try to find his way home now. Max would have to spend the night inside the toy truck. Oh, it was a very long night. The forest was filled with all types of strange noises, and every one of them made poor Max jump in fright. Close to morning time, Max had finally fell asleep. This sleep did not last long, though, because a loud caw caw woke him up. Max carefully got out of the truck looking for any danger. All he saw was an old crow that had woken him up. Max looked around for his berries, but couldn't find a single one. Where in the world did they go? Max looked closer at the crow, whose old beak was stained with blueberry juice. The crow had eaten every last one of his berries. Max thought he might go back and get some more berries, but he was so tired and homesick that he just decided to head home. As Max walked, his stomach began to growl. He had not eaten anything since yesterday afternoon. Max looked down at the ground. It was covered in large brown leaves. He knew these came from an oak tree, and where an oak tree grew, there was sure to be at least 1 or 2 acorns. Max scrounged around and finally found an acorn. He started to chew on the hard shell to get to the juicy nut inside when he heard a rustle in leaves behind him. Max turned around, and right behind him was a very large gray squirrel. All the hair on Max's neck stood up again. The gray squirrel was not very friendly, and Max was in the squirrel's yard. Max dropped the acorn and ran as fast as he could towards home. He looked behind him, but the squirrel did not follow. He was too busy eating the acorn that Max had dropped. How rude! Max slowed down, but he didn't stop moving until he was safe and sound by his front door. Max ran over to the drying mushrooms and ate until he couldn't eat anymore. He was so full that he could barely move, so he just lay in the grass listening to the water lap against the shore. It was wonderful to finally be home safe and sound. Max was so tired and started to close his eyes when he caught a glimpse of something yellow down the shore away. It was the same color as the sail on his raft. Max jumped up and ran toward it. The closer he got to the object, the more certain he knew what it was. Yes! It was his little raft, and it was still filled with berries. Max laughed. What an adventure he'd gone through, and all along, his berries were right here at home. The next time Max went out for a boating adventure, he was going to make sure to tie his raft up better so it wouldn't float away on him. And that's the end, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed this, make sure to hit the like button, and if you're looking for a copy of Maximillion Mouse the Boat Trip, it's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble websites. Thanks, everyone.